Nós, estudantes de Relações Internacionais da PUC São Paulo e integrantes do Grupo de Estudo de Conflitos Internacionais, firmamos uma parceria com Democracy Now!
A partir de agora, vincularemos com legendas em português as mais importantes notícias internacionais da semana.
From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
Whether they are moving the embassy or not, Jerusalem will stay the capital of the Palestinian state.
In Gaza, the Israeli military has killed at least 25 Palestinians today amidst the massive nonviolent protests against the U.S. Embassy opening in Jerusalem. Israeli soldiers are currently firing live ammunition into the crowd of tens of thousands of Palestinian protesters who've gathered in Gaza near the heavily fortified border with Israel. We'll get an update from Gaza with Sharif Abdel-Quddus. Then we look at the new Poor People's Campaign, launched by Reverend Dr. William Barber and Reverend Dr. Liz Theoharis.
23 states have passed racist voter suppression laws. We have 140 million poor and working poor in this country, 62 million working poor people, 14 million children, and we lock people up who fight for 15 while we let corporate crooks go every day. Nothing would be more tragic than for us to turn back now.
Today kicks off with a massive nonviolent direct action in Washington, D.C. and states around the country, starting with a focus on children, women, and people with disabilities who live in poverty. Then economist and former Greek finance minister Yanis Varoufakis joins us on his new book, Talking to My Daughter About the Economy, or How Capitalism Works and How It Fails. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. In Gaza, the Israeli military has killed at least 25 Palestinians today amidst the massive nonviolent protests against the U.S. Embassy's opening in Jerusalem. Israeli soldiers are currently firing live ammunition into the crowd of tens of thousands of Palestinian protesters who've gathered in Gaza near the heavily fortified border with Israel. Al Jazeera is reporting Israeli soldiers have wounded at least 1,000 Palestinians, in addition to the 25 killed so far today. The Israeli military has also been dropping tear gas from drones over Gaza. This comes as senior members of the Trump administration have gathered in Jerusalem for the opening of the U.S. Embassy, including President Trump's daughter, White House senior advisor Ivanka Trump, her husband, Trump's senior advisor Jared Kushner, and Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin. Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, is expected to lay out the Trump administration's plan for Middle East peace in the coming weeks. The Trump administration's decision to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem has sparked widespread international condemnation, while it's been praised by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who spoke Sunday.
This week, we are going to be blessed with a really historic event, the decision of the strongest superpower in the world, our friend the United States, to move its embassy here. President Trump promised to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and he did it. He promised to move the American embassy to Israel, and he is doing it. Of course, we will all celebrate this day, a real celebration tomorrow.
Two extremely controversial pastors have been chosen by the Trump administration to lead prayers at the U.S. Embassy's opening in Jerusalem today, including the right-wing preacher Robert Jeffress, who's previously said, quote, Islam is a false religion inspired by Satan, and that, quote, you can't be saved by being a Jew. He's spoken out against gays and lesbians, against Jews, against Mormons, against Catholics, and against Muslims. After headlines, we'll go to Gaza to speak with Democracy Now! Correspondent Sharif Abdel-Quddus. Iran has 60 days to save the landmark 2015 Iran nuclear agreement following President Trump's decision to pull the U.S. out of the landmark agreement. The Trump administration is now threatening to impose sanctions on European companies that do business with Iran. This is National Security Advisor John Bolton being questioned by CNN's Jake Tapper.
Is the U.S. going to impose sanctions on European companies that continue to do business with Iran?
I think I did give the answer.
Well, you said we'll see.
The answer is it's possible. It depends on the conduct of other governments.
President Trump says he's working to prevent the collapse of the Chinese electronics company ZTE, which has admitted to violating U.S. sanctions by shipping U.S. technology to Iran and North Korea. The U.S. banned American companies from selling technology to ZTE last month, causing the company to announce it would suspend operations. But on Sunday, Trump switched gears, tweeting, "President Xi of China and I are working together to give massive Chinese phone company ZTE a way to get back into business fast. Too many jobs in China lost. Commerce Department has been instructed to get it done," he said. Trump's move comes ahead of high-level trade talks between the U.S. and China this week. Science magazine is reporting the Trump administration's eliminated NASA's carbon monitoring system, which measures the carbon dioxide and methane levels in the atmosphere. The cancellation of the program is the latest effort by the Trump administration to curtail scientific research on climate change. In Afghanistan, at least 8 civilians were killed, 42 more wounded in an attack on a government building in the eastern province of Nangarhar. ISIS has claimed responsibility for the attack. This comes as Taliban militants have killed more than 100 Afghan soldiers and police officers over the last week alone as part of the Taliban's spring offensive. A recently issued U.S. government report says the Afghan army has shrunk by 11% over the last year and that insurgent groups have gained territory. In Pakistan, authorities have prevented a U.S. diplomat from boarding a U.S. military helicopter and leaving Pakistan just over a month after the American diplomat, Joseph Hall, allegedly ran 2 red lights and hit a motorcyclist, killing him. A Pakistani court has ruled Hall doesn't have complete diplomatic immunity and he may face prosecution in Pakistan. The case has sparked rising tensions between the U.S. and Pakistan. Meanwhile, in more news from Pakistan, thousands of protesters gathered in Karachi on Sunday to demand justice for Pakistan's Pashtun ethnic minority. The protesters were denouncing military violence against the Pashtuns, which is carried out under the guise of operations against the Taliban and other militant groups. In the East African nation of Burundi, at least 26 people were killed in an attack on a small village in the northwest part of the country Friday. No group has claimed responsibility. It came only days before this week's controversial referendum over whether to allow the president, Pierre Nkurunziza, to stay in power until 2034. In Iraq, the Election Commission says cleric Muqtada al-Sadr is leading in the results of Saturday's parliamentary election with more than half the votes counted. Sadr has led 2 uprisings against U.S. forces in Iraq since the 2001-2003 U.S. invasion. The preliminary results are seen as a setback for the current Iraqi Prime Minister, Haider al-Abadi. In Indonesia, at least 7 people were killed in a string of suicide bombings Sunday targeting churches in Surabaya, the second-largest city in Indonesia. ISIS has claimed responsibility for the attacks, which police say were carried out by one family, a couple with their 4 children. This is Pope Francis speaking after the bombings.
Sono particolarmente vicino.
I am particularly close to the dear Indonesian people, especially to the Christian communities of the city of Surabaya, which have been severely hit by a serious attack on places of worship. I raise my prayer for the victims and their relatives. Together we invoke the God of peace so that he may stop these violent actions and so that the hearts of all could be filled not by feelings of hatred and violence, but of reconciliation and fraternity.
A newly unearthed CIA memo from 1974 details how Brazil's former dictator Ernesto Geisel personally approved execution of his political opponents who were labeled subversives. The document was sent by then CIA Director William Colby to then Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. It details a meeting in which Brazil's top generals informed the dictator about a policy of more than 100 summary executions carried out by military intelligence the previous year. A week later, according to the memo, the dictator told his generals, quote, the policy should continue, but that great care should be taken to make certain only dangerous subversives were executed, unquote. The memo's revelations have sparked widespread outcry in Brazil. Back in the United States, an attack on the rights of transgender prisoners. The Trump administration's rolled back rules that allow prisoners to use facilities that match their gender identity. BuzzFeed News reports the Bureau of Prisons will now use a prisoner's assigned sex at birth to determine where prisoners will be housed, reversing Obama-era efforts to protect transgender prisoners from sexual assault and abuse. The White House has still not yet apologized for the comments of one of its aides, Kelly Sadler, who dismissed Arizona Senator John McCain's criticism of the CIA director nominee, Gina Haspel, saying it doesn't matter, he's dying anyway. McCain, a former prisoner of war who's battling stage 4 brain cancer at his home in Arizona, has voiced his opposition to Haspel's nomination, tweeting, "Haspel's role in overseeing the use of torture is disturbing, and her refusal to acknowledge torture's immorality is disqualifying." And in Britain, Kensington Palace has announced American Bishop Michael Curry will deliver a sermon at the royal wedding between Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Curry's the son of the late civil rights activist, Reverend Kenneth Curry. He's the first African-American to preside over the Episcopal Church. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. From the University of California, Santa Cruz, this is Democracy Now!
We call on our Palestinian nation to participate in the daily and weekly activities wherever they are located until the 5th of June, marking the occupation of Jerusalem. We are determined to continue the protest of return and breaking the siege.
As Palestinians vow to continue protesting against the Israeli occupation of Gaza, we'll speak to a Canadian doctor who was shot by Israeli forces in both legs Monday while he was helping injured Palestinians. Israeli forces shot 19 medical personnel on Monday alone. Dr. Tarek Loubani will join us as Canada, Britain, Germany, Ireland, and Belgium, among other countries, call for an investigation into the killings, more than 100 since March 30th. Then we look back at the Catonsville Nine. 50 years ago today, a group of Catholic priests and lay people set fire to hundreds of draft records using homemade napalm to protest the Vietnam War and U.S. imperialism. Participants included Fathers Phil and Dan Berrigan.
We have chosen to be powerless criminals in a time of criminal power. We have chosen to be branded as peace criminals by war criminals.
Father Berrigan would write, quote, "Our apologies, good friends, for the fracture of good order, the burning of paper instead of children." And we get the latest on North Korea's threat to cancel the June 12th U.S.-North Korean summit after National Security Advisor John Bolton said the U.S. should use the Libyan model for denuclearization. We'll speak with UC Santa Cruz professor Christine Hung. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The White House dismissed North Korea's threats Wednesday to walk away from the planned summit between President Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. This week, North Korean state media said the talks scheduled to be held in Singapore on June 12th might be canceled if the U.S. continues to demand North Korea unilaterally abandon its nuclear arsenal. North Korea also objected after the U.S. refused to cancel joint war games with South Korea's military. At the White House, Trump said, quote, "We'll have to see," when asked if the talks were still on. This is White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
This is something that we fully expected. The president is very used and ready for tough negotiations, and if they want to meet, we'll be ready, and if they don't, that's okay too.
We'll have more on North Korea and the prospects of a Trump-Kim summit later in the broadcast. In the Gaza Strip, Israeli warplanes launched at least 6 airstrikes overnight in what Israel's military said were attacks on Hamas targets. The bombings came as the United Nations Human Rights Council said it'll hold a special session Friday to discuss escalating violence in Gaza. On Monday, Israeli forces shot dead at least 61 unarmed Palestinian protesters taking part in the Great March of Return. More than 2,700 Palestinians were injured on that one day. After headlines, we'll go to Gaza to speak with Dr. Tarek Loubani, a Palestinian emergency room doctor who is Canadian. He was treating gunshot wound patients in Gaza when he was shot by an Israeli sniper himself earlier this week. New data show the Trump administration has cut the number of refugees allowed into the United States to a near trickle, with an estimated 20,000 set to enter the U.S. by year's end at the current pace. The number would be the lowest since the federal refugee resettlement program was created in 1980. The news came as President Donald Trump lashed out at undocumented immigrants Wednesday, telling reporters, quote, "These aren't people, these are animals."
We have people coming into the country or trying to come in. We're stopping a lot of them. But we're taking people out of the country. You wouldn't believe how bad these people are. These aren't people. These are animals. And we're taking them out of the country at a level and at a rate that's never happened before.
Trump's comment came as newly revealed documents show his administration sought negative information about Haitian immigrants ahead of its decision to end temporary protected status for nearly 60,000 Haitians, including many who came to the United States after the devastating 2010 earthquake. In one email obtained by the National Lawyers Guild and the NYU Immigrant Rights Clinic, senior Homeland Security official Kathy Newbell-Kovarek asked her staff for data on the number of Haitian TPS holders who were on public assistance, how many had been convicted of crimes, their travel habits, and how much money they had remitted to Haiti. The revelation follows a Washington Post report that several senior officials at the Departments of State and Homeland Security resigned after the Trump administration ignored advice from its own diplomatic experts and canceled TPS for tens of thousands of Honduran immigrants. The Senate voted narrowly Wednesday to reverse the FCC's repeal of net neutrality rules in a victory for advocates of the open Internet. The Senate bill would reimpose rules barring Internet service providers from stopping or slowing down the delivery of websites and would bar companies from charging extra fees for high-quality streaming video. Wednesday's 52-47 vote, mostly along party lines, sets up a battle in the Republican-controlled House. This is California Democratic Congressmember Anna Eshoo, whose district includes much of Silicon Valley.
Fundamentally, this is about ensuring that you, myself, all of us, we are the ones, we are the individuals that decide what we want to hear, what we want to watch, what we want to play, what we want to read.
In a financial disclosure report revealed Wednesday, President Trump acknowledged he made a six-figure payment to his attorney, Michael Cohen, as a reimbursement for a hush money payment Cohen made to adult film star Stephanie Clifford, also known as Stormy Daniels. The disclosure came as part of a complaint against Trump filed by the government's ethics office. Trump's disclosure directly contradicts a sworn statement he filed a year ago. Many legal observers say it appears Trump violated federal election law by failing to disclose a loan to his campaign. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, officials from the World Health Organization have distributed 4,000 doses of an experimental vaccine against Ebola after a fresh outbreak of the deadly virus has killed at least 23 people. An Ebola outbreak in West Africa in 2014 claimed more than 11,000 lives. Critics say those lives could have been spared if researchers had poured more resources into finding a vaccine years ago. In Chile, thousands of students marched through the capital, Santiago, Wednesday, protesting against widespread sexual harassment and assault at schools and universities and over the failure of school administrators to respond to complaints by female students. This is Paz Gajardo, spokesperson for the Confederation of Chilean Students.
This movement is historic. This march sets a precedent. It's the kickstart that we, the women of Chile, have initiated in response to the sexual allegation claims established across different universities throughout Chile. There are at least 20 to 25 universities undergoing takeovers and stoppages in response to sexual abuses or rapes by teachers and fellow students.
Police later used tear gas and water cannons to disperse the Chilean marchers. The protest was part of a wider student movement calling for free, quality public higher education in Chile. Back in the United States, Michigan State University has reached a $500 million deal to settle a case brought by 332 women who were sexually assaulted by former USA gymnastics team Dr. Larry Nassar, many of them as children. It's believed to be the largest ever settlement of its kind. Earlier this year, Dr. Nassar was sentenced to multiple prison terms of up to 175 years for sexually abusing athletes over decades. In January, ESPN reported Michigan state administrators failed to turn over documents to federal Title IX investigators that outlined sexual assault charges by Dr. Nassar. Politico reports Scott Pruitt's Environmental Protection Agency and the White House tried to block publication of a federal health study on a national water contamination crisis after one Trump administration aide said it would cause a public relations nightmare. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services study would show that the chemicals PFOA and PFOS, which are used in Teflon and firefighting foam, endanger human health at a far higher level than EPA has previously called safe. The study remains unpublished. We'll have more on that story tomorrow here at the University of California, Santa Cruz. On Capitol Hill, Cambridge Analytica whistleblower Chris Wiley told the Senate Judiciary Committee Wednesday the voter profiling company sought to suppress turnout among African-American voters and preyed on racial biases. Wiley testified that Cambridge Analytica harvested the data of up to 87 million Facebook users without their permission and used the data to fight a culture war. Cambridge Analytica was founded by billionaire Robert Mercer. Trump's former advisor, Steve Bannon of Breitbart News, was one of the company's key strategists. Wiley said he left the company due to efforts to disengage voters and target African Americans.
Cambridge Analytica sought to identify mental vulnerabilities in voters and worked to exploit them by targeting information designed to activate some of the worst characteristics in people, such as neuroticism, paranoia, and racial biases. To be clear, the work of Cambridge Analytica is not equivalent to traditional marketing. Cambridge Analytica specialized in disinformation, spreading rumors, compromat, and propaganda.
U.S. officials have identified a former CIA software engineer as the primary suspect in a massive leak of the spy agency's documents last year. Joshua Adam Schulte, who designed computer code to spy on foreign adversaries for the CIA, is believed to have leaked thousands of documents last year, revealing CIA programs and tools that are capable of hacking into both Apple and Android cell phones. WikiLeaks published the documents last March under the name Vault 7, calling it the largest leak of secret CIA documents in history. Prosecutors have not brought charges against Schulte for the leak, despite months of investigation. However, in August, prosecutors indicted Schulte on child pornography charges that are unrelated to the leaks. He denies the charges. In North Carolina, thousands of teachers dressed in red flooded the streets of Raleigh around the state capitol Wednesday, calling for more funding for public education and a statewide plan to reduce large class sizes. The protests follow similar actions by teachers in West Virginia, Oklahoma, Kentucky, Arizona, and Colorado. And in New York City, a Brooklyn man who spent 17 years behind bars for a murder he did not commit burst into tears on Wednesday as a judge vacated his conviction on murder charges. John Bunn, who's now 41 years old, was just 14 when he was arrested and charged with killing an off-duty prison guard. John Bunn addressed the court after his exoneration on Wednesday.
Y'all convicted and had a grown man in prison, and now y'all still have somebody that's on the loose that's right now that killed someone, and that families out there running free, and I didn't deserve any of that stuff that y'all did to me. They won't admit and say that I'm an innocent man, but I'm an innocent man, Your Honor, and I have always been an innocent man.
John Bunn is one of more than a dozen people, most of them black men, who've been exonerated based on false identification evidence brought by disgraced former New York Police Department detective Louis Scarcella. Dozens more convictions based on Scarcella's evidence are under review. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report.
Nosso programa fica por aqui. Você pode acompanhar a gente pela página do Facebook e pelo blog do GSTR em Transe. Nos vemos na próxima semana. Até lá!
Proteja seu ovo. O professor da minha faculdade propôs um desafio ao meu grupo: construir um aparato de proteção ao ovo.
Para atingir esse objetivo principal, a gente teve que utilizar os conceitos de diversas disciplinas, algumas que a gente já tinha cursado, outras não, para que a gente conseguisse montar esse projeto. Vamos por 77, porque não pode exceder, né, o nosso peso. Quanto deu?
1.625.
Esse projeto ele tinha alguns critérios, tanto de geometria quanto do peso total que ele ia ter que ter. São muitas variáveis, a gente pode variar tipo de cimento, tipo de agregado.
Eu acredito que a gente vai ter que trabalhar com 2 tipos de armadura.
O professor determinou que cada uma das equipes deveriam ter no máximo 5 integrantes e que a gente deveria relatar tudo isso, toda essa parte, tanto de cálculo quanto de ensaios que foram feitas, num trabalho escrito.
A parte da armadura, que envolviam as barras de arame e os outros materiais similares, foram cortados e dimensionados, né, medidos aqui mesmo nos laboratórios de física, né?
Nós tínhamos não só que juntar todo o conhecimento que a gente já teve ao longo do curso, a parte teórica com a prática, né? Então, no desenvolvimento das formas de armadura, na confecção dos traços para achar um concreto ideal para o projeto. E isso é que é legal no projeto, ele nos traz autonomia, né?
Sempre tem divergência, né? Mas isso faz parte de um trabalho em grupo, em equipe, porque nem todo mundo pensa igual. E, na verdade, isso é muito bom, porque você tem uma pluralidade de pensamentos e você consegue enxergar além do que você estava pensando através da ideia de outra pessoa. Isso é bastante positivo.
É que é na prática que a gente resolve os problemas, né?
Como, por exemplo, fazer os ensaios para verificar a resistência desse concreto que a gente ia fazer, realmente fazer esse concreto, porque a gente nunca tinha verdadeiramente feito concreto com alguns materiais específicos, né? Por conta do peso que a gente tinha que atingir. E calcular tudo isso, porque a gente não tinha dimensionado, né? Por um projeto específico como esse. A gente tem critérios padrões, mas para um projeto como esse, a gente teria que utilizar da inovação para atingir os objetivos que foram determinados.
Aqui na PUC a gente tem uma relação muito próxima com o professor, né? Então, às vezes, a gente se cruzando numa cantina, num corredor, ele está ali para o que for necessário. Professor, me esclarece uma dúvida? Ele está ali pronto para isso. Então, eu acho que essa proximidade agrega a geração e fixação de conhecimento, né?
Então a gente tinha a estrutura, né? E o objetivo era verificar se quando ele recebesse pesos em cima, ele ia resistir para proteger o ovo que ficava embaixo da estrutura. Foi aumentando gradativamente esse peso até ver qual era o limite, né? Eu fiquei muito feliz porque a gente ganhou e conseguiu atingir aí o objetivo, que era proteger o ovo.
Eu acho que trabalhar com esses projetos auxilia e facilita muito o nosso aprendizado.